What happens when the people Hollywood loved the most were quietly hated by those who actually knew them? The Golden Era is remembered as a time of elegance, discipline, and carefully polished stars. But behind that carefully managed illusion were figures whose reputations collapsed under cruelty, betrayal, and fear. Some were loathed by co-stars, others by crews, families, or entire communities pushed aside to protect fame. And one name on this list will shock you not for what she did, but for what she represented. Wallace Beery, the star everyone dreaded. Wallace Beery was one of MGM's most bankable leading men, winning an Academy Award and headlining major productions throughout the 1930s. On screen, he played gruff but lovable figures, men whose rough edges hid warmth and decency. Off-screen, however, Beery was widely regarded as one of the most abusive personalities in Hollywood. Co-stars complained of intimidation, verbal cruelty, and physical aggression. Child actors in particular described him as terrifying. Jackie Cooper later recalled that Beery would deliberately humiliate him during takes, reducing him to tears to elicit emotional reactions on camera. Crew members avoided him whenever possible, knowing his temper could erupt without warning. What made Beery especially despised was not just his behavior, but the way studios enabled it. MGM protected him relentlessly, silencing complaints and rewarding his abuse with bigger contracts. His reputation never fully caught up to him during his lifetime, but within the industry, he was infamous. Among Golden Era performers, Beery wasn't merely disliked, he was feared. And fear, more than scandal, is often what earns a place on this list. Luella Parsons, the studio enforcer. Luella Parsons wasn't an actress, but she wielded more power than many stars. As Hollywood's most influential gossip columnist, Parsons functioned as an unofficial arm of the studio system. Careers rose or vanished based on her approval. Unlike later gossip writers, Parsons didn't simply report scandals, she enforced obedience. Stars who defied studio expectations, questioned contracts, or strayed from acceptable morality found themselves targeted. Rumors were printed, reputations quietly poisoned. While publicly friendly, Parsons was privately feared. Actors knew that displeasing her could end careers overnight. During the blacklist era, she openly supported investigations and praised those who cooperated, using her platform to apply pressure. Many despised her not for what she wrote, but for what she threatened to write. Silence was her greatest weapon. By the time Hollywood's power structure shifted in the 1960s, Parsons' influence faded. But for decades, she represented the industry's most chilling truth. Sometimes the most hated figures never appear on screen. Eddie Fisher, America's Betrayal. Eddie Fisher was marketed as the wholesome voice of post-war America. Clean-cut, devoted, and reliable. His marriage to Debbie Reynolds cemented that image, Hollywood's perfect couple. Then he left her. Fisher's affair with Elizabeth Taylor, following the death of Mike Todd, detonated his reputation almost overnight. To the public, it wasn't merely infidelity, it was betrayal layered upon tragedy. America turned on him with remarkable speed. What made Fisher particularly hated wasn't just the affair, but his apparent indifference to the damage it caused. Debbie Reynolds was publicly humiliated. Fisher appeared detached, even defensive. His career never recovered its former stature. Within Hollywood, resentment lingered. Studios no longer trusted him as a moral symbol. Audiences never forgave him. In a system built on illusion, Fisher broke the contract between star and public. He wasn't hated for cruelty or power, but for shattering an image America desperately wanted to believe. Merle Oberon, the woman who erased herself. Merle Oberon was celebrated as an exotic beauty and acclaimed actress, yet her entire public identity was a fabrication. Born to a mixed-race mother in India, Oberon concealed her origins to survive Hollywood's racial barriers. The deception itself wasn't what earned resentment, it was how ruthlessly she protected it. Colleagues reported coldness, manipulation, and a willingness to sabotage others to preserve her illusion. She denied her family publicly and privately. Assistants were dismissed for knowing too much. Her fear hardened into cruelty. While audiences adored her, those close to her often felt discarded. Her identity became a prison, and others paid the price. Oberon's legacy is complicated. She was both victim of Hollywood's racism and enforcer of its cruelty. That contradiction left her isolated, mistrusted, and quietly despised by peers who saw survival turn into calculation. Errol Flynn, charisma without consequence. Errol Flynn lived as recklessly as he performed. His swashbuckling image masked years of scandal, violence, and exploitation. While audiences adored his charm, Hollywood insiders knew him as dangerous and uncontrollable. Accusations of assault, excessive drinking, and cruelty followed him throughout his career. Studios intervened repeatedly, suppressing charges and repairing damage. His behavior worsened as protection increased. Crew members avoided him, co-stars resented him. His charm excused everything until it didn't. By the end of his life, Flynn's body and reputation were destroyed. Unlike others on this list, his fall wasn't sudden, it was prolonged and exhausting. Flynn represents one of Golden Hollywood's most disturbing patterns. When charisma outweighed accountability, hatred often grew quietly behind the scenes. Tallulah, Bankhead, glamour as destruction. Tallulah Bankhead was unapologetically excessive. Drinking, smoking, cruelty, and chaos followed her everywhere. Unlike others, she made no attempt to hide it. Her honesty didn't make her liked. Co-stars found her exhausting. Directors found her unreliable. Friends found her volatile. She was tolerated, not loved. What earned Bankhead resentment wasn't scandal, it was disregard. She consumed attention and left damage behind. Studios endured her because her name sold tickets. Bankhead wasn't feared or concealed. She was endured, and endurance, over time, breeds hatred. Gary Cooper, the quiet enforcer. Gary Cooper represented something Hollywood desperately wanted to believe in. On screen, he was restraint itself, moral clarity without noise, strength without cruelty. His characters didn't argue loudly. They stood still and let righteousness speak for them. That image followed Cooper off-screen, shaping his reputation as a decent man in an indecent business. But during the blacklist era, Cooper's choices quietly fractured that image. Unlike Elia Kazan, Cooper did not dramatically name names. He did something more subtle. He testified, cooperated, and publicly supported investigations that devastated careers. His compliance was calm, orderly, and polite. That made it harder to confront and harder to forgive. Friends expected resistance, or at least refusal. Instead, they found absence. Cooper avoided confrontation. He did not defend colleagues. He did not protest publicly. He allowed the machinery to operate without obstruction. To many in Hollywood, this felt like abandonment disguised as civility. Cooper wasn't cruel. He wasn't vindictive. He simply stepped aside while others were crushed. That silence carried weight. It validated the system. It reassured studios that obedience could be graceful. In Hollywood, betrayal doesn't always arrive with raised voices. Sometimes it comes softly, wrapped in decency, leaving deeper wounds precisely because it never announces itself. Lana Turner, scandal fatigue. Lana Turner lived her life under a microscope long before the term existed. Discovered at a soda fountain and propelled instantly into stardom, she became both a fantasy and a spectacle. The studio system marketed her beauty relentlessly, then struggled to control the chaos that followed. Scandals accumulated with exhausting regularity, volatile marriages, public affairs, tragedy that spilled into headlines. The infamous murder involving her daughter and Johnny Stompanato sealed a reputation that could never fully be repaired. At first, the public sympathized. Turner was beautiful, vulnerable, and seemingly unlucky. But sympathy has limits. Over time, repeated crises created exhaustion rather than concern. Crew members grew wary, studios grew cautious, insurers paid attention. Each production came with tension, not over her talent, but over what might happen next. Turner wasn't hated for a single act. She became resented for the constant instability surrounding her. Hollywood tolerates scandal when it's profitable. It withdraws patience when chaos becomes routine. By the later years of her career, admiration had faded into resignation. And in Hollywood, resignation is often the final stage before quiet rejection. Cecil B. DeMille, the tyrant of belief. Cecil B. DeMille ruled Hollywood like a prophet with a megaphone. His films were monumental, his authority unquestioned. On his sets, obedience wasn't requested, it was expected. Actors feared him, crews resented him. His methods were rigid, moralistic, and unforgiving. DeMille believed order created greatness and dissent was weakness. During the blacklist era, DeMille's influence became more dangerous. He actively supported ideological enforcement within the industry, pushing loyalty oaths and backing investigations. His moral certainty left no room for nuance. To disagree was to be suspect. What made DeMille particularly despised wasn't just his power, it was how confidently he wielded it. He believed righteousness justified cruelty. Careers damaged in the name of principle were acceptable casualties. While others agonized over choices, DeMille felt no visible doubt. That certainty hardened resentment. People didn't simply disagree with him, they felt crushed by him. When his era ended, few mourned the man behind the spectacles. His films endured. His methods did not. Hollywood remembers DeMille as a giant. Many who worked under him remembered something else entirely. Our Joan Fontaine bitterness unresolved. Joan Fontaine's career was permanently entangled with rivalry. Her feud with sister Olivia de Havilland wasn't a footnote, it became the defining lens through which Hollywood viewed her. What began as competition hardened into obsession. Fontaine measured success not by her own achievements, but by comparison. Every award, every role, every mention carried resentment beneath it. Colleagues described her as manipulative, cold, and perpetually aggrieved. Success did not soften her edges, it sharpened them. Interviews decades later still returned to old wounds, long after audiences had moved on. The tragedy of Fontaine's reputation is that her talent was real. She delivered powerful performances. She won an Academy Award. Yet bitterness eclipsed those accomplishments. Hollywood grew tired of the tension. Directors avoided the drama. Peers kept distance. Over time, Fontaine became known less for her work than for unresolved anger. In an industry built on reinvention, Fontaine refused to let go, and Hollywood rarely forgives those who carry old wars into new rooms. Humphrey Bogart, allies lost. Humphrey Bogart's image remains untouchable. The voice, the stare, the defiance. He symbolized resistance and integrity on screen. Off-screen, his legacy fractured quietly. In the early years of the blacklist era, Bogart publicly supported civil liberties and aligned himself with colleagues under threat. But pressure mounted, studios intervened, careers hung in balance. Bogart retreated. He distanced himself from activism, issued clarifications, and stepped away from confrontation. For some, this was survival. For others, it was betrayal. Friends who had stood firm felt abandoned. They understood fear, but not silence. Bogart never became an informer, but he withdrew when solidarity mattered most. Audiences never turned on him. His films only grew in stature, but among peers, something cracked. Bogart's case illustrates a recurring Hollywood truth. Legacy isn't only shaped by what you do, but by what you stop doing when it becomes dangerous. That fracture never fully healed. Hedda Hopper, fear made flesh. Hedda Hopper was not an actress, yet she terrified Hollywood. As a gossip columnist, she wielded influence unmatched by most stars. Careers depended on her favor. Silence depended on obedience. Hopper didn't merely report scandal, she weaponized it. She enforced morality, ideology, and loyalty through threat. Actors lived knowing a single column could end everything. She outed performers. She pressured studios. She praised informants and punished dissenters. Fear was her currency. What made Hopper particularly hated was not ignorance, but enthusiasm. She enjoyed the power. She believed she was righteous. Within Hollywood, she was loathed privately and courted publicly. Few trusted her. Fewer mourned her influence when it faded. Her legacy is not entertainment but damage. Charles Laughton, humiliation as method. Charles Laughton was revered as a genius. His performances were transformative, his intellect unquestioned. His methods, however, left scars. Actors described rehearsals as psychological warfare. Praise was paired with degradation. Confidence was dismantled before being rebuilt, if at all. Laughton believed humiliation produced truth. Many never recovered from the experience. Talent excused cruelty. Studios looked away. Results mattered more than damage. Resentment followed him from set to set, unspoken but persistent. Greatness did not soften him. It isolated him. Shirley Temple, the symbol no one could escape. Shirley Temple never harmed anyone directly. She did not abuse co-stars. She did not bully colleagues. She did not exercise power over others. And yet, resentment followed her long after childhood stardom faded, not because of who she was, but because of what she represented. Temple became the idealized proof the studio system used to defend itself. When reformers raised concerns about child labor, exhaustion, lost education, or emotional damage, executives pointed to her smiling image and said, "She turned out fine." That argument silenced countless stories that never reached the public. Other child actors worked brutal hours, endured pressure far beyond their years, and exited the industry broken or forgotten. Temple's innocence was real, but it was also profitable. Studios perfected her image and used it as a shield, deflecting scrutiny while continuing practices that harmed less marketable children. Her success became a justification rather than an exception. That is why her name appears here. Not as a villain, not as a perpetrator, but as a symbol, one that protected a system that quietly harmed many while presenting one perfect face to the world. Elia Kazan, the name that never healed. Elia Kazan was one of the most gifted directors in American film history. He shaped performances, revolutionized realism, and created enduring classics. But his artistic legacy would never escape a single decision. Kazan named names. During the height of the blacklist era, he testified before the House Un-American Activities Committee and identified former colleagues as communists. Those he named lost careers, livelihoods, and years of their lives. Kazan did not. His career continued, his influence expanded. What made the damage permanent was not only the act itself, but Kazan's refusal to express regret. He defended his choice publicly. He justified it repeatedly. He framed it as moral necessity rather than survival. To those harmed, this was not honesty, it was erasure. Hollywood never reconciled with him. When he received an honorary Academy Award decades later, applause fractured the room. Some stood, others remained seated. Kazan's films endured. His relationships did not. His name became a scar the industry never allowed to fade. Hollywood never forgot and never forgave. The golden era sold perfection, but perfection was carefully manufactured. Behind the glamour were people protected, excused, or quietly resented for choices history refused to forget. These names remain famous, but fame is not the same as forgiveness. And as time strips away illusion, what survives is not the image Hollywood created, but the truth it tried to hide.